for site plan, or whatever this site plan? Site plan at the next meeting. And then the rezoning, I think, could occur over its time, because again, all we're talking about is just parking there.
You remember our policy on conditional approvals?
Yes, I don't think, what I'm proposing is that that this be postponed tonight to the next meeting, the subdivision plat be submitted, and all that action be taken at the next meeting, unless somebody has a different approach or way to do it.
No, I know this has been going on a little while. I'm just hoping he's getting the right instruction based on, for me, the very get-go of the beginning of this is combine the lots. I wanted to make sure, I'm just hoping that he was given that kind of.
I think we said that at the last work session, to be honest with you, was what we told
Okay.
him we suggested. As a matter of fact, the comment says, that's your comment? It's right there. It says, in order to extend the commercial use over the area covered by Lot 2, both parcels must share the same zoning and either be combined into a single lot, having the adjoining lot line adjusted to encompass the proposed parking area, or have the access via ingress and egress easement over both lots. That was what we said at the last work session. That was what the comment was.
So
Now,
that's,
he can't make a smaller lot because of his restricted covenants, and I understand that. So then I think the easiest thing to do would be just to combine them, and that should be a pretty easy plat to do because all of the utilities, everything's in place. And we approve that at the next meeting.
so that's, I think that's where we need to go, and I won't speak for the entire commission, but I would be able to do that combination and also the site plan approval on the same meeting. And get you going. I think that's, the whole idea here is how quickly can we get you a parking lot?
Okay. But what about they're trying to remodel the building there too, and they're holding up our building permit based on this site plan. Is that something we can move forward with? Is our building permit, at least let them start our remodel?
I think we're gonna have to lean on council for that one.
Yep.
Who would answer that question? Would that be Eddie or? Oh,
I'm trying to figure out a way to speed things along. The only thing I know to do would be to have some type of special meeting, but Casey informed me that this has been a requirement since the preliminary meeting before they submitted the site plan. So this has been around for a while, not just the last work session. So I don't know, other than, like I say, trying to have a special meeting, I don't know how to speed it up any faster.
So they have known they needed to do this?
Yeah, we we had a more or less a preliminary meeting before they submitted the site plan application on what they were going to be able to do on this site, because there were some concerns about highway construction setbacks off of 31, and then the minimum lot width requirements and the zoning differences and things like that. And we went over everything as far as having like zoning on both properties and having the properties combined, and potentially shifting the lot line is one thing they were looking at, but it sounds like that's not possible. But yeah, like I said, I had a pretty lengthy conversation with, I actually don't remember if it was the engineer or the owner about it beforehand, but we went over all that before the application was made.
I will say, and again, I don't wanna speak for the whole commission, but we got no problem with getting this, any of this, what you're asking for, getting it done. It's just
It's gonna be
the
in
right
order.
amount, the steps have to be taken for us to do our job up here.
I think everybody thinks it's a great project. We just got to make sure it meets in the proper process to get it done.
You're not aware of the steps that were gonna be required?
Right, I mean, we're looking through and trying to find a path forward, because it seems like that this would be an accessory use for what's there, and then, I mean, there's some other examples of parking lots around that have been established. I mean, this is it's going to be for that building, and it starts on the lot, and it is an accessory to that, because we were initially wanted to try to go behind the building and around the other side. It just wouldn't fit, so there wasn't room on that. Our client bought the other parcel, so we were going to expand, so I mean, we
Yeah,
thought that it may fit in as an accessory use to that building, since it is, the primary structure is already there, and it is, I mean, there's no question on which use that building is, and the parking, since it wasn't, where was not room on that parcel, that this was just an extension of that use.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the definition of accessory use, but I really don't argue with you on that point. I think it is an accessory use. But normally, you have the accessory use in conjunction with the primary use on the same parcel. Here, you got the primary use on one parcel, and you want to put the accessory use on a separate parcel. And again, nobody has a problem with what you're doing, other than, as we've said along, there's got to be some method to ensure that that parking is going to remain with that use, and that second lot is not going to be sold off to somebody else, then leaving that first use without enough parking, and without us having any way to enforce that. And so that's why we propose these couple of options. I mean, the best use is to combine those two lots together. In order to help, we'd be willing to consider, a reciprocal easement agreement of some kind, but normally we don't really do that unless there's 2 or 3 uses on the same parcel. And here you don't have that. You got 2 separate parcels. So the best and most appropriate thing would be to combine those two together, and then that puts it to bed forever. You've got accessory uses on the lots. Otherwise, if you ever try to sell that, you come back here, you're going to have all these conditions or exceptions to compliance. For example, if you ever want to submit an alter to us, can you, like for example, Mr. Casey, can you tell me, does this meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance? We'd have to say no, because it doesn't do this. And so that's why we want to try and fix it up front if we can.
I think our time is
I
up.
think that'd be the easiest.
Yes. We're going to have to end the work session and begin the regular meeting. Once we get into the regular meeting, we'll get back to you when your time comes up, and we'll continue the conversation. I'd like to call to order the regular Planning Commission meeting for April 10th, 2023. Roll call.
Gant,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Diamond,
Here,
Vaughn,
Here.
Lindsay, Smith,
Here.
Nelson, Lede,
Here.
McMillan.
Here.
Mr. Connor, would you lead us in invocation and pledge allegiance?
Father, we thank you for everything you give us, and we thank you for loving us. And we thank you for days like today when we just can see your handiwork in creation. And Father, we thank you for allowing us to live in this country, in this county, in this state, in this city. And Father, we thank you for each person that's on this board here tonight that gives of their time in service to this community. And Father, we ask that you give them wisdom to help them make decisions that would be right for this community. Father, there's hurting going on all over this country, all over this place, and so much discord. And Father, there are serious questions and threats to our national security. And Father, we just ask that you give wisdom to our national leaders and to those people that protect us and protect our freedoms, and that you keep them safe. Father, we do have faith, though, that you are in control and that you are sovereign. And Father, that gives us great comfort. We ask that in Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any committee announcements?
Report from the city council? Okay, yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. City councils recently adopted several ordinances. Of particular interest tonight will be an amendment to the zoning ordinance to the table of permitted uses, where we did add some allowances for separate uses regarding go-karts. We have an allowance for electric go-karts, and then we also have an allowance for electric or gas go-karts by planning commission approval. So that's something that we had forwarded a positive recommendation for that was adopted. We also did on that. We did also address the parking for the fire department and the zoning ordinance table of permitted uses, and to where we're decreasing the number of required parking spaces for fire departments. Let's see, we have rezoned from R1 to B3 the property located at 0 Oldsmobile Road. Also rezoned from R1 to B1 the property at 10284 Highway 31, right across the street from Rockwell. We updated, we amended the personnel manual for the city of Spanish Fort to address the nepotism policy, whereas previously we didn't allow nepotism at all. Now it's really just amended to where you're not allowed to supervise a relative. No direct supervision of relatives. We also, let's see, I think that's about it. Mr. Mayor, do you have any recollection of?
No, I think you've got it. Just a few announcements of the events coming up. We got Delta Woods and Water coming up at April the 29th, all-day event at Five Rivers, which is a great event. If you've never been to it, we'll have a couple of thousand folks there where you get to see everything about the Delta. You know, I can go into details with a lot of different things to cover. We also have a concert here on May the 7th prior to our next meeting with the Planning Commission. It starts at 5 o'clock. We have the art show and 6 o'clock concert with Mobile Pops, I believe it is. And I think that's got it. Oh, we got Tidy the City. Thank you. Tidy the City, which is an event we host. We put dumpsters over at Spirit Park, and I'm trying to look for that date. Okay, that starts May the 4th through the 7th. We'll put big dumpsters over there. You can bring all your household, not garbage, but debris and mattresses. Can't bring chemicals, tires, batteries, any of those kind of things, but it is a venue that's well received across the city to get some things just straightened up in your basement, so, or your house, whatever you got. So, thank you, Bernard.
Okay. Now it's time for the approval of the minutes from February 27th, work session, March 13 work session, and March 13 regular session. Have you had time to review them? Are there any corrections? If no correction, they stand approved as written. Old business, agenda item 230305, application for land use. Casey?
Mr. Chairman, this is a application for land use on the vacant lot north of Eastern Shore Lanes in the Eastern Shore Center. This applicant is proposing to utilize the 8.7 acre lot to construct a miniature golf course and go-kart track. The site has frontage on Eastern Shore Boulevard as well as an access easement from the existing entrance to Eastern Shore Lanes and is currently zoned B3 general business. The proposed use as a miniature golf course and an electric go-kart track is allowed in B3 and B4 zoning only by planning commission approval according to the table of permitted uses. The overall site will require site plan approval before it can be utilized as the proposed use, in addition to the requested land use approvals from the planning commission. At that time, staff will work with the applicant to ensure all site plan requirements are met. The staff has reviewed the submitted information regarding this application and has found the proposed use to be in compliance with the Spanish Fort zoning ordinance, and the proposed use is allowed at this site with planning commission approval. Staff would like to make note that approval of the application for land use by the planning commission does not constitute approval of any site plans or building plans as submitted thus far, and the applicant will still need to seek appropriate approvals prior to making any changes or any site changes on the property. Pending any further comments and or requirements by the planning commission for this site, staff recommends the planning commission approve agenda item 230305, application for land use for miniature golf course and electric go-kart track in B3 at Lot 1 of Cole re-subdivision of Lot 4, Arlington Eastern Shore 4 subdivision.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add that the table of permitted uses in that section this falls under the amusement and recreation services section, and it states that those services must be so arranged that noise, vibration, lights, and all other possible disturbing aspects are enclosed, screened, or otherwise controlled so that operation of the establishment will not unduly interfere with the use and enjoyment of the properties in the surrounding areas. And also states that the Planning Commission shall have the right and authority to impose conditions and or restrictions upon such use and or location of improvements or structures to provide for the aforementioned concerns or protections. Under the circumstances, if you all do recommend approval or approve this, as discussed in the work session, I would recommend that you put at least a condition that the proposed uses for the golf course and the go-karts be in the southeast corner of that parcel as depicted and as shown on the drawings.
Just a question, and I may be missing it, ma'am, I apologize. The proposed use as a miniature golf course and an electric let's see, we are specifying this as an electric one here on this particular one, because
Yeah, you have to have Planning Commission approval for both the golf course, miniature golf course, but it's my understanding that they're applying for electric go-karts. So you need to specify that it's for that use, electric go-kart use only. If you recall, you all recommended and the city council approved adding 2 uses. One, electric go-karts only, the second, electric and motor. And so in this case, they're asking for just the electric. And so you'd be approving it for electric use only. And again, based on what they've submitted and your desire to keep that as far away from the apartments as you can, I would include that location requirement as well in that southeast corner.
Any additional comments?
Is it working?
Push it down. Just push it and let go.
Oh.
Push it and let go.
Hello? Okay. The electric is absolutely all we were interested in. That's the new modern thing. And I called the guy about see if they had like a noise survey, and he said no, because there's really not any noise. But I guess there is some, like a whining noise, like a Tesla. But I really threw this plan together in a hurry. It's not really to scale. It's really bigger than it. Probably that square we was looking at earlier would take the parking and everything. It's about 3 acres total on this large lot. So, and it's to our advantage too to keep it as close to our existing building as we can. If I could, I would scoot it over next to our building, but there's a parking lot there and it's just not economically feasible to tear up the parking lot. Our existing building sits about where it says Lot 2 right there. And I'd love for that to be right down against the building because we have to service this and take care of our customers from our existing business. That's really the only reason it's there. Right about where that line is that goes from that curved road that comes in, there's a ditch right there that runs from the apartment complex all the way to the detention pond. It runs underneath our parking lot. I don't want to commit now, but there's a chance we could move all that into this nook down here. You know, that would be a perfect place for the putt-putt, would be down here on this road. I just told the guy to throw me something on a piece of paper so I could get land use approval, and then when we start getting further into the site planning, if it's feasible to tube that ditch, we had to tube it, you know, to put our parking lot there. You can't build a structure on top of it, but you might could put go-kart tracks or putt-putt on top of that ditch, and it's pretty close to where that little line is right there. It comes, you know, at an angle from the apartments down. So we were trying to kind of save our road frontage because that's the valuable part of our land, and we was trying to keep our service area kind of close to our arcade, which is about where that little number 2 is, where that I could have done a better job of presenting this, I'm sure, with just a screenshot of a Google map. But if it's feasible, let's tube the ditch, and we can still service it. We might can pull all that down into that nook, and it would actually be further. We'll commit to not, we don't want to go any closer to the apartments. That's the last thing we want. But there's a chance maybe, and that, he can redesign that track too. I really didn't like the way he designed that. He can change that and probably where it's more longer this way and less long this way. So without spending a lot of money on site work, you know, on engineering, we just threw something out there. But so we'll be communicating, and I appreciate y'all's time that we can make it even better in the future. So just wanted to say that. Felt like it was a pretty positive note, but I just want to say we can make it even better and get it further down away, closer to our existing building.
Yeah, quick question. What time's your bowling alley close? Weekends? What time's the bowling alley close weekends?
Friday and Saturday close at
1.
So we can make a provision where that's not open as late.
Yeah, that won't be open that late.
During the week, what time? Midnight, okay. Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking about for outdoor activity. Just, I don't want to put a curfew on them, but I was
Yeah.
just thinking about for outdoor activities. You know what time the container park shuts down? It's early, isn't it? You don't know?
That's something we can take into consideration later. I don't know if it would
Okay.
be.
Yeah,
We got a lot of work to do as far as the parking. I think the guy told me it would take about 70 parking places according to their numbers. So, you know, probably the parking would be about where that track is. The parking would probably be in the back. And then everything else wouldn't shift any closer to the apartments, but it might shift toward the road. In fact, you want your mini golf right on the road. If you look at the one they built on 20 down by our Foley location, because it's got the rocks and the waterfalls and all that, you actually want that right against the road. But I would say it would make more sense to have the parking back there about where that little block is, where that checked line is, and that'll probably take care of a 70, 80 parking places, and then shift it all to the west a little bit, maybe even down into that area if we can do something with that ditch. You know, so thank you.
In light of what he just said, then, Mayor, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In light of what he just said, if you're going to impose a condition on location, then I would say that it be located in the southeast corner of the property, unless otherwise approved at a different location along the southern portion of the lot line by the Planning Commission during the site plan review process, so that we kind of leave that door open just a little bit.
I just noticed that Alabama Power Transmission.
That's something that we've discussed previously that may or may not be an issue. That's something they're gonna have to discuss with Alabama Power. they do still have more than enough room to work with on the lot. If they do have to go outside of that easement, they may be able to put some parking in it. I don't know for sure what Alabama Power would allow there, but that is something they're going to have to address with the site plan as far as their layout.
I think we can move forward.
Did y'all ever think about putting the go-kart on your existing parking lot and then building new parking spaces?
That's what I was just talking about. I mean, we can address that again, but the guy said that it'd add a lot of cost. Because you're gonna have to dig all that up, and because it is it's not elevated, but it is contoured, you know, you basically gotta do a lot of dirt work. And,
That's why I was
that
asking
would
if
be
it
the
was
best case
flat.
scenario. I'd love it to be down against our building, and we hand the guy a golf club or sell tickets to the thing right out of our arcade. That's the whole general idea of this thing, is to get more people into the arcade and stuff, not just the go-karts. You know, we just had a 100,000 square foot entertainment center open up in Mobile. We get about a lot of business from Mobile. So it's huge facility, indoor facilities opening up over there. And they're gonna have go-karts and all that indoor. So, yeah, it would be great. My friend of mine's doing one in Nashville, and the way his land worked out, you literally you get your clubs and stuff in his arcade, so that's the perfect scenario. But I don't know if that's feasible for us, is to tear up that parking lot and start from scratch and then build another parking lot.
And I wouldn't suggest it if it was more expensive. I was just thinking if it could be used that way.
Yeah.
You know, it was flat, it might save you some money, but I wouldn't.
That's kind of what I was thinking, and we can readdress that. I would love that, but I don't know if that's going to be very feasible. But we could talk about it. I'll darn sure run the numbers on what 150 spots would cost parking, and then, we might go that route. But
Any additional comments?
thank you.
Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion?
Okay, for 23-305, 230-305, it is actually stated in the report it actually has electric in here already that he's applying for. But I recommend positive for this land use for 230-305 with the condition that I figured here, figure A1 showing the site, that it will get no closer to the apartments than shown on figure A1. I think that's enough.
I would recommend that it be located in the southeast corner as depicted on A1, or along the southern lot line as approved, unless otherwise approved by the Planning Commission during the site plan review process.
So moved as council's comments.
Second.
Who was that second? Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Gant,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Diamond,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Ledee,
Yes.
McMillan.
Next item on the agenda is agenda item 230401, application for minor subdivision plat. Casey?
Mr. Chairman, this is a minor subdivision plat application for Doleave Road subdivision. The subject parcels are located along Doleave Road to the east of Bay Minette Creek and west of Doleave Road. The subdivision application proposes to combine the existing 3 parcels into 2 resulting lots equaling approximately 1.083 acres and 1.085 acres. The subject parcels are located outside the corporate limits of the Spanish Fort in Baldwin County, but fall within Spanish Fort's planning jurisdiction. Staff has reviewed all submitted information regarding this application and has found all required documentation to be accounted for and in compliance with all applicable ordinances and regulations. Therefore, staff recommends the planning commission approve agenda item 230401, application for minor subdivision plat approval for Doley Road subdivision.
Are there any comments? The public hearing is open for this agenda item. If you'd like to speak, you can approach the podium and give us your name and address. Public hearing is closed. Any additional comments? Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item 230401, application for minor subdivision plat, Doley Road subdivision.
Second.
Roll call?
Gant,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Diamond,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Lede,
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
It's been approved. The next agenda item is 230402, application for site plan. Casey?
Mr. Chairman, this is an application for site plan for additional parking for Premier Family Care Clinic, which is located on Lot 3 of the Woodside Business Park. The additional parking to be added will be covering mostly Lot 2. As we went over in the work session, there are still a few comments to be addressed on this one as far as landscaping and drainage. And then there is a good bit to be cleared up, I guess, on the zoning of Lot 2 and the layout of Lot 2 and 3, or the reciprocal access to Lot 2 and 3.
Mr. Chairman, as we discussed in the work session, the recommendation from staff is that in order to accommodate the proposed project parking requirements, and everybody agrees it's a good project and we want to help them every way we can, that they combine lots 1 and 2 in order to make sure that they meet all the parking requirements for the primary use or primary proposed use that's located on Lot 3. In addition to that, we would suggest that they submit a rezoning request for Lot 2 so that the zoning will be consistent on both lots in the event they try to do something in the future with that property. And so with that said, it may be appropriate to postpone action at this time to give them time to file those applications and make those changes. If they do it quick enough, it can be on the next meeting agenda for preliminary and final plat approval, since there's no new lots being created and all the utilities are located there. You could also have the hearing to make the recommendation for the rezoning at the next meeting, and subject to the fact that the building is located on Lot 3, and they're not proposing to build any new uses on Lot 2. You could also maybe consider doing the site plan review at that same meeting.
Okay, we had a representative on this item, didn't we?
Good evening, Commission and Mayor. My name is Ben White. I work with Tensol Engineering along with John, and would like to try to address some more questions, I guess. I guess one question I have is, what are the remaining deficiencies you mentioned? I haven't heard.
Let me ask you, when did y'all get this comments to your questions? Today?
We got the revisions submitted end of day Thursday. Matthew reviewed them over the weekend, got comments back to me that were still outstanding on the engineering side of it. The zoning and subdivision and lot access comments have been there, as I mentioned, for a couple months probably.
I had a conversation with Matthew, I guess it was maybe Thursday evening. We talked about what we did talk about the drainage was the methodology that was used by the original engineers to calculate the drainage calcs. One was the SCS method versus the rational method, and of course they used the rational method, which was typical for what we'd done back then and what most still do. I respect the fact that if you change it to a particular method, that's fine. The problem is, in order for me to come back and to validate all of, I had to pretty much do the calculation for the entire subdivision. And we're talking about just a small piece of lot. Now, obviously, by inspection, the original calculations that we did provide, because we're able to acquire the original calculations from, I think it was Poly Engineering that maybe had done the original. Their calculations were consistent with a industrial park, and every single lot being developed is what the ponds were sized for back then. That's not the case now. Ain't but a couple lots been developed. One of the lots that we are going to develop won't have much development done to it. Obviously, lot 1, which we have no problem including together. So I guess my point is, for such a small thing, I don't know why that we would need to go back and redo the calculation for the entire subdivision just to keep from having to put a retention pond where it's not really going to easily be put in that lot. Now, we obviously respect any decision you make. That's just an argument we would like to at least plead with you to not make us do any additional drainage work for such a small project, especially in lieu of the quite extensive drainage retention. I got 3 retention ponds out there now that's never been even a quarter of the way full from inspections. Matter of fact, they probably need some addressing as far as vegetation. But that's one of the things that we talked about, and we didn't ever come to a conclusion on that. He was going to get back with me. I think the other items, engineering related, was a comment about the parking pavement buildup. Said we needed to change, either have a geotech report done or change to the pavement buildup that's in the regulations. So we modified that to meet that criteria. At least I think I did. That's the intention.
So there's the drainage, there's also the landscaping. So there's a minimum tree density of 10 trees per acre. So the current landscape plan that was submitted has 3 trees for a parcel that is 1.3 acres. So that's one of the other comments that remains. If I could just real quickly summarize the question about detention. The existing pond was designed under the county regulations, right? Back in 2006 or 2008. This property subsequently was annexed into the city, right? So there's an existing pond that was designed under county standards. We're now adding impervious surface to a lot, lot 2, and portions of lot 3. And so the question is that existing pond grandfathered, or is there a requirement for the applicant to provide detention in accordance with the city's regulations? We've had situations in the past where master plan detention pond for development was designed prior to the city's subdivision regulations and was approved by the city. And in those cases, we have grandfathered developments that come after that. We've not had a situation where a master plan detention pond was designed under county regulations and subsequently annexed. So the question is, in this situation, would the existing master plan pond be grandfathered, or is there a requirement for the applicant to meet the city regulations?
I mean, real quick, the overall commercial park, if it was designed for retention, I say absolutely that area is grandfathered in for that containment, especially with our eyes being put on a retention pond in a major storm that we can visually see that it's not even getting full and being utilized. I'm just surprised we're having a conversation if we're thinking about making each individual lot owner in this development have their own retention.
Yeah.
I'm surprised
So-
we're there. I'm surprised we're having that conversation.
Well, there's pretty significant difference in the designs for the pond that's there and the ponds that would subsequently be required after the subdivision regulations.
Tell me the difference.
It's gonna be tens of thousands of cubic feet if it were to be added to the existing pond. So if they were to develop all the lots, that pond would be significantly undersized for the current city subdivision regulations.
You're saying based on the impervious roof and paving areas?
Yes. Under the city's current regulations, correct.
But he's adding.
But the original pond was designed in a way that considered that pavement, but the method of design that was used is not the same method and results in a significantly smaller pond.
I'd like to see that difference. I mean, you're saying it's very significant, and I'm just surprised.
It is.
That you would have a retention pond designed for an entire subdivision
Right.
that would be that much different from our city regulations.
It would be. Yes. So and we can go into it if you want to, but the rational method does not consider time duration of rainfall. It gives you a peak flow, basically. It's really good at designing pipes because it gives you a peak flow, so many cubic feet per second. It doesn't give you what the actual rainfall event and runoff looks like from that event, and so the pond that you get, it has no tie to reality, and it's significantly smaller than the ponds that are designed with the SCS method. But really, I think it's less of that question as is it grandfathered or not.
I have a question.
I think it should be grandfathered in myself. I mean, if this property had not been annexed into the city, and I understand it is, but if it had not, eventually it would have been completely built out as you see it today without any change in the detention pond. And, you know, where would we be any worse off then than we would as it being developed in the city? I don't know. I find it hard to believe that we would be any worse off. That's just my initial take on it.
I also would like to add one additional thing, just for clarification purposes, for me. I think on page 57 of the regulations, where's that at, John? It does specifically state that the rational method can be used for sizing of drainage infrastructure, including basins. Now, however, it does go on into the next paragraph and says, no, you can't, you got to use SCS method. So there's a little bit of confusion there also. He'll pull up 57 and I'll read it exactly how it's written. Okay, so on page 57 of under Article 5, Planning and Development Standards, under Drainage System, 3A says the method of determining stormwater runoff shall be as follows. For areas less than 200 acres, which are clearly less than 200 acres, the engineer may use the rational method for determining inlet spacing, roadway spread, the sizing of open and closed pipe network, and collection basins, which argued that the detention ponds are actually a basin. Of course, it goes on to say, in the next section where, specifically talking about detention ponds, that the rational method would not be allowed. So I think there's a little bit of confusion there, possibly. So, but it would be a moot point if we all could come to agreement that it's grandfathered in. That would be nice.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm not sure about any ambiguities. I think those are correct in how they're drafted. I haven't looked at that. But I think we may have misunderstood Matthew's question here. He didn't necessarily say which one should apply. He's asking a question for purposes of his analysis as to which one you all feel comfortable applying. I think under the circumstances, as long as the engineer can assure us that the design is going to flow appropriately and not overwhelm the existing facilities that they have constructed, that it would make sense that they ought to be allowed to develop and use the existing detention. And I don't think Matthew was advocating one way or the other. I think he was asking a question. Under the rational method, they designed under a rational method with the county to a 100-year storm event. We use the SCS method, 100-year storm event, but it's a little different how it's done, and it would be larger under our present regulations. But since it is a designed and existing subdivision, as long as they can assure us that it can meet those requirements as built and has done, I would suggest that they be allowed to develop it. Now, I don't want to always say that everything is grandfathered in, because some of the examples that we've done in other places is when the applicant comes in and wants to use the property for a different use than the subdivision was designed or intended. For example, here, I think that's consistent with what they've done. Matter of fact, he's not even building another building on that lot. He's building parking. We have had some instances where we've had strip shopping centers that were designed with a number of units or tenants or square footage in contemplation, and then they want to divide and make additional impervious surface, additional buildings, additional uses that were never contemplated by the original design, and we did require them to go back and bring it up to date. But in this case, because the proposed use and construction is consistent, I would suggest that they be allowed to go forward unless Matthew feels differently about that. I think he was just really asking a question, as long as the engineers, the design professionals agree that the existing facilities can handle that flow.
Okay, yeah, and my discussion with Matthew, I just wanted to say, there is a subdivision right behind this, you know, so and it does drain downhill towards the subdivision, I think. I don't know where the outfall is for that existing pond.
There are 3 ponds for the,
3?
yes, sir.
They obviously gotta flow back towards that subdivision somewhere, right? So, yeah, so I'm just gonna add, you know, I'm glad he's looking at it from the standpoint of if that commercial park was completely filled out with roofs and parking, we're gonna be okay with that total overall drainage, and I'm not sure we will, but I gotta lean on Matthew to tell me we are, if the ponds are gonna get overflowed or.
To me, that's the big question from Matthew. Will it cause a problem if we grandfather it in? I would like to grandfather it in, but not if we're going to cause a problem down the road.
The only way to know that would be to do the calculations per the SCS method. I really think it's, the answer to the question should be independent of the calculation methodology that was used, and is more of a question of, it's more of a question as it relates to the regulations and how they're applied versus engineering. If that, it's difficult to put into words, but
We got 3 ponds down there, and we just don't have numbers on it.
correct. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
I've got
there's-
rational. I've got numbers based on the rational method, which, I mean, we can debate, you know, rational method versus SCS method. I don't have confidence in rational method detention calculations. They have no tie to reality. It's not. And because of that, it's no longer the standard practice for detention pond design in our area. But I think the question really comes down to, for example, we've had at the town center, the pond was designed prior to 2016, prior to the adoption of the new subdivision regulations. Properties that have come in subsequent to that have not been required to have detention on their property, right? This situation is a little bit different because it was not something that was approved by the city. It was approved by the county under the county's regulations. And so the question is, in my mind, is the city comfortable with that? Is that an acceptable?
Is the county's regulations some of what we would have had?
At the time, yes.
As long as the county's regulations are similar to what we would have had, which I think they are, is that correct? Having someone redesign after a project has been committed, the site's been developed and being used, can be very difficult and costly. Now, at the end of the day, if the engineers or anybody says that pond as designed is not sufficient to meet the need or the flow for whatever reason, calculated wrong, it's not built as designed, I mean, as they look at it, we expect them to reveal that to us and show us that. But if you do the calculation of the rational method versus the SC, it's going to come out different. There's no question. So it really is a matter of whether or not y'all feel comfortable on the circumstances of proceeding with the existing infrastructure that's there. And in fairness, I think, unless we find some legal argument differently, that they're bought a lot in a subdivision that has existing utilities and improvements, and and so unless we show that it's inadequate somehow, I think it's appropriate to let them go forward. But then again, to reserve the right, for example, if they came in there and were going to do something different than the type of use that was anticipated at the time of the design, then I think we should always reserve the right to require a different review or analysis of that project based on that different proposed use.
And I think that's fair, for sure.
Just so I know, what would be a different use? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all impervious surface. I guess I'm just trying to make sure I understand, because every time somebody comes in here wanting to develop one of these lots, we're going to have, I'm guessing we're going to have to go through all this and get, how is all that going to work going forward with the rest of the lots?
Oftentimes, in the design of a master plan pond, for each individual lot, there will be assigned an amount of impervious surface. So if an applicant comes in and says, I want to do more impervious surface than was in the original design, then there would have to be some measure to mitigate that.
And in this case, by the nature of our project, we would be doing less impervious surface than what the original design would have been.
Sometimes it's easy. In the city where you had business and commercial butting up against each other, and the design for a residential subdivision had contemplated a driveway and a house. But the proposed use here is to pave the whole thing from side to side, top to bottom. So you've drastically increased the amount of impervious surface, the runoff, everything. And that design for a subdivision in 1976 might not meet that requirement now.
So there was probably never any plan at all to build a house and a driveway. It was all going to be impervious surface with whatever setbacks. There was probably not even any landscape required at that time. So I'm thinking there was not even any landscape that was going to be counted in that. So it was all going to be covered up with pavement or rooftop.
I'm perfectly fine moving this along as a grandfathered piece of property because it was approved by the county based on a footprint. Now, if it gets crazy where they're changing the footprint drastically, I'd have a problem with it. But we annexed this property in based on what they had out there, so I don't have a problem with that, personally.
I personally am fine with us grandfathering in. I am concerned about the landscape ordinance not being done. That I'm not willing to give on.
And we are willing to take any recommendations on the landscaping where we are deficient. I did not recognize that we were, but as soon as we're shown that we receive a comment back and let us know kind of what we need to.
Yeah, feel good you won one battle, all right?
Oh,
But
I ain't doing that.
Landscaping.
I'm not a tree guy, I
I like
promise you.
you, I think we need to get the landscaping
I'm not a
done.
tree guy, so I'm
Okay,
not going
okay.
to.
In the comments that we provided, it has a reference to the ordinance in there. So if you'll take that reference and go look on the City of Spanish Fort website, you'll see the landscape ordinance there, and you'll be able to read through and see what the requirements are. If you have any questions, obviously, feel free to reach out to me.
So I guess moving forward, is there any possibility, and I'm just asking, and respect any decision you guys make, obviously, but could we go ahead in an effort to move the project along? Could we go ahead and we could write up an easement over the entirety of Lot 2 tomorrow and have it signed and recorded probably by the end of the next day to connect Lot 2 to Lot 3, give them access, needed an easement access while we go through the process of rezoning and combining the lots. And it's really more of a timing thing for us. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you guys want to do. It's really more of he's in a bind. He needs to move us forward. His lease is running out soon on where they're working, and they're trying to get this moved forward as fast as possible. And he can't even start working on the interior of his building at the moment, what's just kind of made it more of a critical issue.
Yeah, that's,
Even the parking lot's not that big of a rush. The biggest thing is trying to get them to where they can work on that building. That's the critical path item.
are you changing the footprint of the building, or is it going to be the same?
It's the same. The building footprint's the same, just adding in the back part of the building is a garage or storage area now, and they're adding office or spaces for clients or for patients.
But without the additional parking, would they not meet our parking requirements?
Well, he said he'd like to go forward and do an easement first and go ahead and get that going.
I don't think that gets him any faster, to be honest with you, because he's got some drainage calculations on some pipes, you got landscaping, there's several items that need to be addressed. One of the things we could look at is if you're not changing the footprint of the building, I'm certainly willing to talk with staff and the building department about whether or not you could get a building permit to begin the renovations. I don't know that for sure, but we want to try and help you every way we can. But I think because of the number of deficiencies, I don't think you're going to get any faster ahead on your site plan tonight because of those deficiencies we've talked about. But if you could submit those applications at the next meeting, if everything goes like we think it should, you could get the preliminary and final plat at the next meeting. That'd be behind you. You could get the site plan review approval done at the next meeting. That will be behind you. The rezoning is something that will take 45 or 60 days. But again, we're just talking about parking other than a use per se. Normally, we require the rezoning to be done first, but in this instance, since we're basically just using the same use and we're not doing a different use other than parking, I think that's something that we could probably work with. Certainly we can talk to the building official about the building and getting started on the renovation, but there'd be no guarantee because the use of that building, as you're proposing it, is conditioned upon having the appropriate parking. So,
Well, the parking is a parking spot for every 200 square foot of patient area. And what's been proposed on the remodel is 14 patient areas at approximately 7 by 12 rooms, which is about 1,200 square foot, a little under, so 6 parking spots. We've got 12 currently. We were just trying to expand. So that's why.
Sorry, say that again. Are you saying that you have enough parking existing
For just the patient area, because the entire thing, there's an office, there's a kitchen. What's being added is around.
Do you not have enough parking for the area that's being added? Is that what you're saying? Or you do have that?
Based on the calculation, 200, a parking spot per every 200 square foot of patient space, we feel like there is, I mean, enough to get started there. There's enough, that would be 6 spaces required. We have 12 currently. But we're just trying to add the parking lot. So we don't think that the building permit for the remodel should be held up based on this parking lot. It will be completed before the remodel is, but we're trying to get our client to be able to move forward.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this right. Are y'all remodeling the whole building?
Yeah, there's, so the back part is an open garage. They're adding offices in there, client or patient areas. There'll be a total of 14 patient areas in the building when it's completed. And there are approximately 7 to 12 spaces. So one spot.
Is there going to be is there going to be a portion of the building that's not being used?
Well, there's a kitchen and there's a staff area and a waiting area. That's all being used. But it's 200 for patient areas, what the regulations said. Which would say we needed 6 spots, and there's 12 currently.
I mean, the only thing I know to do is to talk with the building official to see if we can, and I'm not sure we can, address issuing them a building permit to begin either demolition or renovation, conditioned upon this, but I don't think you can do anything tonight at the planning commission level without having this information, because you all have made a policy that you don't do conditional approvals. And so if it's allowed and we can accommodate them through the building permitting process to allow them to begin renovations, we can certainly talk about that and try and help that out. As it relates to the rest of it, I think the fastest thing to do is to respond to these comments and help us get those applications filed so that we can take care of that at the next meeting. And I'll be glad to speak with you and Casey and staff and the building official to see what we can do to help y'all begin, if we can, the renovation. Does that make sense?
We thought that we met all those ordinances. We went through all of them, and I guess we missed them. We thought we addressed all of the ordinance, so we went through every ordinance and thought we found what they required. So we thought we had addressed all of them. So we'll address them when we get will we get additional feedback on what our deficiency is?
Well, I think you might get some additional based on what they received the end of last week, but the comments, some of these comments have been around for a while, so you've had those. If you wanted to give them to you again, we can do that as well.
Well, okay.
But yes, the answer to that is yes. They'll send you another summary of what's left to be done, and that way you're all on the same page. If you got questions about that, we can do it. We can certainly talk about that. And again, we have no problem with the project. We just got to make sure we meet these requirements. And if we can help, can't promise, but if we can help get y'all started, because what I heard, you'd like to get started on the building, right?
Correct.
If we can figure out a way to get you going in that way, at least you won't lose 30 days waiting to get back up in front of us with the other stuff. So
Correct.
I think that's about the best we can do under the circumstances. So again, I can't promise that, but we will certainly look at it, okay?
Okay.
Any additional comments?
Does this have to be
So,
postponed?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we postpone this item till the next meeting to give them additional time to submit the documents that we've talked about in the additional applications.
Okay, do they, excuse me, do they need to request a postponement?
No, it's not a subdivision plat. That they're not requesting a subdivision at this point in time, so we don't have to have that in writing. You all can take that action and just move to postpone it to the next meeting. Take a little vote, postpone it to the next meeting.
Okay, we'll postpone it to the next meeting, and hopefully everything is correct and we can move it along. Next agenda item, 230403, application for site plan. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, this is a application for site plan for Spanish Fort Fire Station located at 7500 Spanish Fort Boulevard. Site plan application proposes to develop the new site as the new location for Spanish Fort Fire Station number 1. The current site plan includes the construction of a new 16,804 square foot building to include engine bays, administrative offices, sleeping quarters and facilities, storage, and other like uses. The existing conditions in the vicinity of the subject property are typically medium to high traffic commercial uses, similar to what is being proposed at this site. Because the applicant is proposing a use in conformance with its current zoning classification, and because the use conforms largely to its surrounding uses, impact is expected to be minimal. The subject property is identified on the comprehensive plan's future land use map as professional and local business, which does accommodate the proposed use for this area. The proposed use does also conform to the current zoning district of B2 local business. The applicant has submitted a copy of the approved ADEM permit, and staff is satisfied that adequate controls and detention for drainage on site has been accounted for at this time. Staff has reviewed the submitted landscape plan in accordance with the most recent version of the landscape ordinance and has determined that the submitted plan meets or exceeds the minimum requirements as stated in the above reference ordinance. The application as submitted does meet the minimum requirement for parking at this site under the parking calculations as required for fire station, fire training facility, fire equipment, and apparatus storage. Located in section 7.6 of ordinance number 51-96 as amended. Because the proposed use should not require large volumes of ingress-egress at one time, and the site is accessed internal to the existing shopping, that was a typo. Impact on traffic is expected to be minimal. Staff does not feel that a traffic impact analysis is needed for the current development, assuming ALDOT does not require it. One thing that we didn't get to go over, and I'll give my recommendation in a second, during the work session, they are requesting to remove, I don't remember the exact count. You remember what it was, 50, low 50s, 54 preservation trees, I believe, on the site, which will require planning commission approval. Let me see if I can. Hang on just a minute, we'll give you the exact count. As I mentioned, they are providing above and beyond what's required with the landscaping as far as the ordinance goes, but with the site area as it's shown, there are a number of preservation trees that are unfortunately going to have to be removed in order to construct the parking area and engine bays, building, vehicle routing, things like that.
We hate to move them, but
Yeah.
I'm afraid we got to do
And-
this, so we're saving as many as we can. How many are saved? You say 54 going away, how many are saved?
16, I think. There's total inches, I guess, was around 820 or so to be removed. Total saved was 150 or so. So they are saving a few larger live oaks and a few pine trees. But unfortunately,
What a trade out.
the majority of the larger pretty trees, I guess, are right in the middle of the fire station. So, anyways, the staff has reviewed the submitted information regarding this application and has found all required documentation to be accounted for and in compliance with all applicable ordinances and regulations. And pending the planning commission's decision on the removal of the preservation trees. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve agenda item 230403, application for site plan approval for Spanish Fort Fire Station.
Discussion.
The chairman did point out something to me, just a future reference, where it references Blakely Way on the west side. That's actually Wayside Drive, so you'll have that correct.
And Mr. Chairman, as part of this process, you also need to have the Planning Commission approve under 115211 this site. As it relates to this section says, when the Planning Commission shall have adopted a master plan of municipality or of one or more major sections or districts thereof, no street, square, park, or other public way, ground or open space, or public building or structure, or public utility, whether publicly or privately owned, shall be constructed or authorized in the municipality in such plan, section, and district until the location, character, and extent thereof shall have been submitted to and approved by the commission. So I think there needs to be two votes. One is the first vote would be that you approve of the location, character, and extent of this proposed use on this site, and then the second vote would be to approve the site plan. And that's in accordance with section 11-52-11 of the Code of Alabama.
I will make one mention on the site plan. It hopefully will change once we approve this, because that bottom left-hand corner, that sort of pizza-looking shape there, or a slice of pizza, we hope to get that where it's part of the site so we can change some detention around and things like that. But we got to get this thing moving, and it's bringing it forward now. You may see a slight change on site plans.
Do we need a motion to say that we approve the location water according to 11-52-11? Is that a
Yes.
motion that we
Yes, it'd
need?
be a motion. I recommend that you make a motion to approve the location, character, and extent of the proposed location of the site of the proposed fire station number 1 in accordance with Alabama Code section 11-52-11.
I cannot remember all that, but I would like to make that motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Gant,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Diamond,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Lede,
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
Okay, now for our second motion,
To approve the site plan.
it's approve the site plan.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve agenda item 230403 with the provision that they have permission to however many trees that y'all said in the preservation trees.
Second.
Roll call.
Gant,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Diamond,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Lede,
Yes.
McMillan.
Thank you. Now it's time for the public participation. Would the public like to participate? Public participation is closed. Is there any additional business we need to discuss before we read the announcements? Mike, do we have any new business, additional business? Okay, the announcements. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission will be held Monday, May 8, 2023. A work session will begin at 6 p.m. in the multipurpose room of the Spanish Fort Community Center, followed by the regular meeting at 6:30. The next informal work session of the Planning Commission will be held Monday, April 24th, 2023, at 6 p.m. The submission deadline for the May 2023 regular meeting agenda is Tuesday, April 11, 2023, at 12 noon. If there's another business, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.